Hey guys, welcome to Tech Around and Find Out, your go-to weekly dive into the biggest trends and real stories shaking up the crypto world. I'm your host, Calvin, a builder, early stage investor, co-founder, and all-around blockchain fanatic, bringing you insights straight from the front lines of crypto innovation. Each Monday, we break down the must-know news, spotlight emerging projects, and chat with founders, builders, and thought leaders who are reshaping the crypto landscape as a whole. In diving deeper into the tech, we cut right through the hype and get straight to the heart of what really matters. Disclaimer, nothing on this show is financial or investment advice. NFA. Always do your own research and consult any licensed professionals before making any decisions. Now let's dive right in and find out what's happening this week. Have to say, welcome to have a amazing first guest on this series. Bread, I think, needs no introduction. As of the last 24 hours, he's number one on everybody's Kaito Yap boards for sure. But I think the most impressive thing is I think everyone never knows exactly what your role or title is because it feels like you're everywhere, doing everything, traveling almost half the year every day, seeing all the new ecosystem kind of landings, right? In terms of meeting all of the folks that you guys are building with inside MegaETH, the ecosystem, the community, the builders. Everything is you and you are everything. So it's a pleasure to have you. I know it's busy next month with everything rolling out. 20 some days now left, right? For the launch. We're quite excited for that countdown. But we've got, I think, a lot of things to cover. So I want to dive straight in. I think Breadguy is probably the best name that I've seen on Twitter in a very long time. I think it'd be great to be able to share a little bit of an intro yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest. I didn't know that was going to be the case. So this is exciting. And kind of curate our stuff. I guess. So yeah, I do post a lot of stuff. I've gotten open about how much I share, which I think makes it feel like people get to know me a little bit better. So yeah, I've been posting about my travels. I was over in Singapore for seeing 2049, and then went over for DevCon. So like I was bouncing around a lot and sharing the journey while I was doing it. So yeah, that was fun. But I'm terminally online, as are most people, and I've gotten good at just like throwing out tweets really quickly, and so it makes me feel omnipresent, I guess. Yeah, and so I guess talking a little bit about my name, you asked about Breadguy. Like literally, it's just a pseudonym I picked way back in the day when I was totally anonymous. I just, it actually is kind of close to my actual name, and a little bit of a personal joke. I just chose it on a whim, and then I've just owned it. Made a little Breadguy my PFP. My actual background, like I guess I'm mostly known or was known for doing nerd talk stuff and visualizing a lot of that stuff. I do a lot of graphical things. And that's just because my background is technical. I went to school for computer science. I was a consultant for a long time. And then I tried to bring that energy to Web3.
I think that's energy is super needed. I think a lot of times we go straight over the 150 IQ curve on the other side. And then everybody else is like, what? Right. So I think I love that. And I think for me, I think the first time I saw your tweets was one of those explainer info.
Right? Excalidraw is the app I use.
Yeah, it's my favorite. With handwrite style text. I absolutely love it. I'd love to introduce to Williams on our team, who is our Excalidraw wizard on our team. Does all of these internally as well. But I think I think you have already said a lot on Twitter. But I think for some of the audience that hasn't been able to dive into the deeper weeds of MegaETH and its technical merits, I think we spoke a bit a few days ago about obviously some of the trade-offs that people have been talking about on scalability and what MegaETH stands for. So I think it'd be worthwhile for you to maybe share a little bit about MegaETH first, and then we'll start diving deeper into how we can
build next layers. Yeah. All right. So yeah, at highest level, I would say MegaETH is a layer 2 on top of Ethereum. For people who don't even know what layer 2s are, I mean, it's a separate blockchain. They're all totally separate blockchains that post information to another blockchain, and therefore there's a relationship there. So our relationship is with Ethereum mainnet, and we are layer 2. So that's the highest of levels for us. The next level would just be to say that the why we're different from other layer twos and what like are the design decisions for our implementation are, is just that we believe strongly that layer twos need to push for vertical scaling. And what that means is there's basically you have to go one of two directions whenever you're dealing with these systems, right? And one is to go horizontal, which is where you realize that like not everything can be contained in a single box. Therefore, you create replicas of the box, and then you make sure they all play together, and therefore you can go really, really wide and have them all play together and cover a lot of ground, handle load. We are of the opinion that the ecosystem is showing a strong desire for a single box to just be very, very big, very, very performant. This box being a blockchain. And we are doing our best attempt to make our box the biggest, baddest, fastest box out there in the world right now. A lot of that's underpinned by our founders, right? So Yilong Li and Lei. Yilong is distributed systems PhD from Stanford. Lei, MIT. He worked previously doing research for even Ethereum, actually previously for EigenDA. They've come together to say that we're going to rewrite the stack. We're going to rebuild this thing from scratch, and we're going to try to make a layer two that is against the grain, because the grain is that everyone so far has gone horizontal. Everyone's working to play together and interop with each other. And we're just saying, like, we're going to make one box as big as we can, and we're going to do whatever we can to make that thing as big as we can, and hopefully unlock some applications through doing that.
Yeah, I think we'll go a little out of order on the script here, because I think this ties actually to some of what you mentioned about Mega Mafia as well. That inside this big box, you guys have also been curating a lot of interesting projects that actually need this scalability for this chain, right? Coming myself from Binance, obviously we spent a lot of time in CeFi, and I think for better or CeFi, scalability is still what users are expecting. And I think there's still a gap in the usability of some of the DeFi products, though especially in the last couple of years, we've definitely made significant strides. For you, I would love to hear a little bit more on how some of the projects in the ecosystem / what Mega Mafia has been trying to kind of hone or select as showcase apps that actually need this throughput and that can play really nicely into this big box thesis.
Yeah. So I think it's important to point out that, like, for people who aren't aware, there's a lot of blockchains out there. There's a lot of blockchains out there. So there's always begs the question of, like, why do we need another one? Like, what's different? So I think it's important for us to say the opinionated approach that we took, some design decisions lead to one or two very key unlocks. And then through finding that unlock, we isolated builders, founders that can create like actual applications that can leverage that stuff, right? So the unlock that we have specifically, I mentioned horizontal scaling that's being done by most of the L2s. Because L1s require consensus. L2s, if they're going horizontal, they're trying to decentralize their sequencers. Sequencer is just a block builder for blockchain vernacular. They are all building in today the plans to decentralize their sequencer, because they're going to do that stuff, which again is a mechanism that's used at the L1. L1s need decentralization consensus for communication between nodes to agree on what's true for that blockchain. Now, these L2s are going to need the same thing. And because they need that same thing, they're creating a lot of lag time that comes through the process of coming to consensus, right? Agreeing on something to be true. It takes time for messages to pass back and forth to agree on stuff. We are saying no. We're saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go down this big box path. This big box path gives us unilateral rights to create blocks. And because we don't have to come to agreement on anything, we can update the state of the chain instantaneously, right? So as soon as the thing is in our hand, the thing being the transaction, whatever they send to us, whether it's a DeFi position or a NFT sale or a transfer of tokens, whatever, we can instantly apply that to the blockchain, the ledger, and then move on, right? Pass that information out throughout the ecosystem. Everyone can act upon it. So that's why you see our catchphrase of, like, we are the real-time blockchain, because most blockchains cannot be real-time. They physically cannot be real-time, because if you're coming to consensus, it requires you're outside of this instantaneous field, which is between like 100 and 200 milliseconds to come to agreement, which is just normal, and they have to do it. And so it extends beyond the real-time instantaneous level. So we're operating in this thing. Again, it's a opinionated decision. It unlocks this real-time instantaneous feedback. And to since we build that, we made the decision to build this because it wasn't being delivered in the market. We said, okay, we got to find applications that are going to build on top of us and leverage this. You mentioned Mega Mafia. That's the name for our accelerator that we have, or we are doing. It's been running for over a year now. At this point, we have 17-ish applications that are have been building with us. We're still building the chain, right? Testnet's not launched yet, but they're operating in our private testnet. They're through the ideation phase, like they're contributing feedback from like what applications actually need at the fundamental level. And they are creating applications across sectors that answer the call to what can be built in an instantaneous blockchain world, right? To give you a couple of examples, right? Like a big one that's always top of mind for me is Euphoria. Euphoria is a perps trading, gamified perps trading, I guess I should say, application, right? And their tagline is just like tap trading is what they're inventing, right? And if you think of your phone and tapping, right, in a Web2 app, right? If you were to tap on your phone, right, you would expect feedback from that tap, right? If you're playing a game, you tap a button, you want it to react to your tap, you want it to do something. In a Web2 world, when you're not dealing with centralized systems, you could tap something, it can instantaneously respond to you and say that thing is good. You cannot replicate that right now in blockchains because, again, they have to come to consensus. And if you were to tap on a game that is built on top of base right now, another L2, right? It takes 2 seconds for them to create a block. Tap, you'd go 1, 2, confetti would fly out. Yeah, not a great user experience, right? So like that's one that would be able to have that create that feedback loop of tap on chain, confetti shoots, great, awesome. We have stuff that's over in like the gaming space, right? Like if your fans or your listeners are familiar with OnCyber, which was a big app back in 2021. All right, they're digital or metaverse style. Yeah, you can see like NFTs inside your world, all that stuff. He hasn't lost the vision, right? Like he still loves that. He loves this digital representation of on-chain assets, composability, all this stuff. The founder of OnCyber is actually in Mega Mafia, right? So he's in this incubator, or not incubator, he's an accelerator. And he's building a game called the AWE engine, right? AWE box is the actual handle. And the entire thesis for this is like, okay, create a really lightweight digital environment that allows for integration into, it's kind of like a Roblox, like a Web3 Roblox that allows for integration into Web3 products in your browser, right? There's no download. You can come, it's really lightweight. People can create up their own environments and it can but dynamically interact with on-chain assets. And the example I always use for this is he showed us a game where like you just spawn in, you're running around a room. At the top of the room, there's a portal. And through this portal comes tokens that are recently launched on the local chain's launchpad, right? And the size and the view of the box that comes through that is the market cap of the actual token. And if you bump into the box, you instantly bought, $10 worth, right, of the token. So it's kind of weird, gimmicky, but like you need that to be instantaneous, right? You need that feedback of like, I bumped into this thing. I mean,
sorry, characters suck as I'm like walking through here and trading.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like you can't like you bump into the box and like hold on, pause. Okay, cool. You made a purchase. Like move on, right? You need that feedback. So he's working in that direction, trying to make this really lightweight and fun. And then just last example that I think is also worth talking about is Sweep, right? It's a social app. TriSweep is their handle. They're working on like prediction markets and like betting in a live stream environment, right? So if you're to watch a streamer, Twitch is huge, right? You go to Twitch and you're watching stuff in real time and you want to bet on, maybe they're playing a game, right? And you want to say like, oh, they're going to beat this boss or, whatever. And people are just live betting inside of the actual app, right? And because it's live, right, things happen dynamically very quickly. You want people to be able to make a bet and have it settle on chain instantaneously, because if you, again, fighting a boss, right, and you say this person's going to die or they're not going to die, you make a bet, it takes 1, 2, and they die, but between the time that actually takes for your stuff to settle, like it kind of feels gross, right? Like I made the bet, the event happened, and then like, oh, my bet went through. Like, well, it was never going to make it, right? That's stupid. That sucks, right? I lost the bet because it was a 0% chance by the time it hit. Not fun. But yeah, so we have 17 teams all in the same vein. They're all building stuff that's on chain, enabled by our unique construction. And because we've been building with them for a year in like 30-day stretches, they all got a little bit of camaraderie. They're friends. They want to work together. So like our on-chain CLOB lending protocol integrates with our DEX, integrates with our incubated stablecoin, which has native yield that's only enabled by our speed, which integrates with our leverage lending protocol. So like they're all interwoven because they've worked together, lived together, built together for a year. That we're hoping it unlocks a unique ecosystem.
Yeah, I think there's some really magical beauty of this like cohort type of mindset where all these other projects all want to work together. And that obviously the technical showcasing, as you mentioned, is a key kind of commonality that brings them together to your ecosystem. So I think that's quite awesome. As an accelerator ourselves, we obviously love seeing teams actually spend time on the early stage side of things and not just, oh, let's go mint tokens for the sake of it, right? So I think it's really powerful to see what you guys have done here. And I think it sets a tone for, I think, what the market in the long run will need to see from the chains and the ecosystems that they believe in. For you guys, I think one of the things that I promised we'd dive a little bit deeper into and get you a chance to do your magical explaining. I think we talk a little bit about obviously a trade-off of the big horizontal versus vertical types of structures that you've mentioned. Obviously, this does have some implications on throughput, which I think is one of the key measurements that you want to be able to deliver, but also at the same time, the trust assumptions that come with that. I'd love for you to be able to explain a little bit more for the audience. What are the trade-offs here? Because obviously, anyone that just said one box solves everything, it sounds too good to be true. So let's figure out how we can explain it better for the users.
Yeah. First, I'll define the position of like one box doesn't solve anything. I just think it's because there's going to be enough demand in the world to overload any singular box. I think people hear the solution that we're proposing and they say, "Oh my God, like you're dumb if you think everything's going to fit on one box," right? We acknowledge that's not true. But the thing that it brings is like, one, you look at the market and you see a Hyperliquid, you see a Solana, you see these vertically integrated chains, and it kind of goes counter to the last few years where people will say like, "Oh, every app will have its own chain," and like that's a beautiful vision. Like everyone captures 100% of their own value, and it's like everything's all hunky dory. But you sacrifice a lot of stuff in that, right? Like it's the same thing with the Windows Apple like combat, right? Like yes, you could do a lot of stuff with Microsoft, but because Apple abstracts and integrates a lot of the stuff, it's just simple, and people gravitate to simple, right? Like there is a pull there. So even though Apple can't facilitate the entire world on it, even it holds a lot of value, right? There's more Android users than there are Apple users across the world, but there's a lot of value in Apple because value accrual within that ecosystem that is cohesive is a good story, and it's it's less messy. So that's just our thesis. And then so let's talk about it. So we make the decision. We say we're going to go big box. Why do we make those decisions, and what were the implications of that decision? If you understand the context of Ethereum, right? If you're an L2, you have a relationship with other chains. There's two pieces of data that L2 chains post elsewhere, right? So one is the proof. The proof is like a snapshot of what is true for a given chain. It's the ownership. It's the state of the chain is what you'll hear referred to in Web3. So it's the state. It's a window, it's a snapshot of who owns what. And then the other thing that they will post is called or just like transaction patches, right? So if you were to walk through it in your head, right? Again, blockchains are like living things. They're constantly updating. They're updating in snapshots, right? So it's something is true, right? It's a snapshot. It's a picture of it. And then there's a bunch of things that happen. These are all transactions in a block. And at the end of the next one, another snapshot is taken, right? So you have two truths. This person had this, and then, X amount of time later, a bunch of people had different assets and different ledgers or different wallets, right? And then all the transactions that transpired between those two things to make sure that these two things match up, right? So who goes what, whatever. So the size of those two things, right? The everything is true snapshot is very small, right? Whenever a chain is living, it's just it's a small thing. It's a little string of data. It's a proof. The transactions though are very big, right? The bulk of the information that's emitted from these chains is the transaction history, and you need that so that you need to make it available to everyone, so that everyone else can see that the two snapshots you provided, you're not lying about them, right? So that they can prove that going from snapshot A to snapshot B is accurate and no one's falsifying anything, right? It's verifiability. It's one of the reasons this whole chain or the whole industry has popped up. So a chain has those two things, right? The snapshot's very small, the actual raw data very big. In today's world, as an L2 posting to Ethereum, most of the chains, all the popular chains anyways, are all called rollups. that means is that you post both of those things, the snapshot and all the data, to Ethereum. Right? They all have to live there, which is fine. The problem, though, with that, and what goes counter to our decision, is we saw the amount of data that our performance system was putting out, and we said the amount of data we're putting out literally cannot fit on Ethereum. It's too much data to go to Ethereum, right? And that's the larger of the two components. So we had to make the decision, say, okay, if we break away from Ethereum, right, instead of saying both of these two things go there, we have to post it somewhere else. Where we post it, we are posting it on EigenDA, which is a specific ABS sitting on top of EigenLayer, which is secured by Ethereum. And the implications of that is that now, because we've made that decision, like the benefits we get are that we can emit more data, right? We can send out more stuff. It's cheaper, it's faster. So like our users get cheaper fees. We store more data. Our total amount of data we can emit out is higher, but it introduces a third party into our relationship, right? Before, the relationship was just between Ethereum and us as a chain, right? So you only have to trust Ethereum. Now, because there's another party, you introduce trust assumptions. And trust assumptions is you assume that this other party will stay live, right? That we trust that other party to do its job, right? Ethereum has proven to be very resilient. It has not been gone down. It's been live 100%, right? It survived a nation state attack through Tornado Cash. EigenLayer and maybe EigenDA is a little unproven. So some people are skeptical, saying that you're no longer fully secured by Ethereum. Some people even will go so far as to say you are no longer Ethereum. And that's just, it's a alignment debate that's going on these days. But we think the trade-off is worth it because the upper bound that it unlocks for performance is not just like a marginal thing, right? If you look at the total throughput, we'll use transactions per second because it's a known metric, TPS. If you look at it across all of the rollups, again, rollups are things that only have a relationship with Ethereum. It's collectively like 200 TPS across all 40 some odd rollups, right? It's a lot of them. And they're at capacity, right? Right now, they're at a limit. They cannot go more than this. And if they do, prices increase exponentially because that's how the market works, the pricing market works. And then for us, right, because of this one decision that introduces this trust assumption, the trade-off is not to go from 200 to 250 or 200 to 500. It's from going from 200 to 100,000, right? It's a step change. It changes how everyone thinks and builds and can actually operate on chain. So that was the decision. That's why I made the move, is because it's multiple magnitudes of performance difference, and we think that's worth it.
Interesting. I will try to work my magic on explaining this, though I don't think I have as much experience as you on this. But I think growing up, the analogy that gets me the closest to the way that you described this is getting the ticket at a deli counter. So the ticket is like the proof, like this is why you should be included in this order of getting your ham or whatever it is. And right now, a lot of people are literally trying to post all the ham, like, I don't know, 2 pounds, 1 pound of cheese, all the transactions that happen here. They're trying to put all of this all rolled up in one big stack and say, we need to put all of this in one place. What you guys are fundamentally saying is that, well, actually, maybe the checkout aisle can actually be somewhere else. EigenDA in this case is kind of your checkout case. And you're saying our deli just does the deli part. Like, I need to cut the meat, get everything to be kind of real time so that you don't feel some lag as you're getting the order that you want. But the actual DA side of things doesn't have to be at the same counter. It's clear that if the same guy cutting the meat needs to also take your money and calculate everything, it's just not going to be a smooth process, and it's not going to be real time like what you guys want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great analogy. I wrote up an article recently, and it was I used like I don't know but when you were in school younger, right, you would do math problems, and sometimes your teachers would get mad at you if you didn't show your work, right? They would think you use a calculator, right? So if you just give the answer, right, and then they say show your work, you have to produce a big block of text, right? You have to show all of your work and to prove that you knew how to get from A to B. It's kind of like that, where like maybe you're on a postcard or you have a little post-it note, and like you only have so much information or so much area to actually show your work. And the amount of work it would take for us to show how we got to our answer is too big. So we have to get a totally separate piece of paper. And like, yeah, you have to trust that the piece of paper, you don't lose it, you don't crumble up or whatever, but kind of a similar concept, but yours is great.
And it doesn't fit because you're hoping that the system's good enough to answer like 100 math problems at the same time, 1,000, 10,000, that is just going to need so much more space to actually be able to prove everything.
Yeah, it's like if you're using E equals MC squared, like some very complex proof that you have to prove, right? If you're given a post-it note, and like Ethereum is a post-it note, it's so small. It's so small. It's like you're given an incredibly complex math problem, right? You can write the answer on it because it's just a formula or whatever, but to produce the work that it would take, like you need a whiteboard for the work to actually show how you got to that answer to go from A to B. So we produce so much work, we need a whiteboard, right? We cannot put it on the post-it note. It would break the post-it note. It would make it ineffective.
Got it. That's a really great visualization. I think on this one, then maybe I'd love to ask why EigenDA? I think you mentioned also, some folks talking about whether it's Ethereum or not, or whether it's battle tested. Would love to hear a bit of your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the decision was before I joined the team. So I wasn't a part of that. And actually, literally, is just more about capacity, right? So, like, they're referred to as alt DA chains because Ethereum is the main one that's pioneering modularity. So Ethereum is Ethereum DA, it's premium. And then there's EigenDA and like Celestia. Celestia is a blockchain that is built specifically for holding data for data availability. And then EigenDA is an ABS. It's not a blockchain, it's an ABS on top of EigenLayer that is horizontally scaling. So Lei, our technical co-founder, he actually co-wrote the paper for EigenDA. So very strong relationship with Sriram, who's the founder of EigenLayer. And the team itself, like if you look at the amount of load that they expect to be able to handle, right? Right now they're able to handle about 15 megabytes per second. If we hit our capacity that we're shooting for around that 100,000 transactions per second, that roughly equates to about 18 megabytes per second. So even them, we're already a little bit over, if we were to be at capacity, over what they could handle. We don't anticipate being that way soon. Just from demand, it takes a while to build that level of demand. But they're the closest to what we need to be. If you look at the next biggest competitor, which is again is Celestia, I think right now on mainnet they're doing like 3 megabytes per second, which is still a fifth of what we would need, which is already not enough, right? So strong relationship and just sheer like volume, like we think we can outpace maybe what Celestia can do. So it's just a lot of things make sense.
Got it. Very clear. And on the other teams that are using Eigen right now, do you see other teams running into the capacity kind of limit, if you will? Are there other teams trying to tackle this?
So there's no. So okay. So are you talking about chains running into capacity or Eigen or D8 chains?
Chains. Mm-hmm.
So chains running into capacity limits issues. Yeah, I mean, like again, all the rollups right now are currently at capacity, and I think that's one of the reasons I was fascinated with what they're doing, like what MegaETH is doing. I joined in November, started writing about them in July, but now I'm part of the core team because I fill a niche that they need. The thing that I was fascinated with recently over the last 6 months, years, I wrote a lot on the actual DA blobs, the thing that was introduced on Ethereum, because I'm skeptical that it's going to play out fondly, right? There's a lot of misaligned incentives with it. One, Ethereum does not iterate fast enough. It's not scaling. And the space that it introduced back in March of last year, which is this blob space, it's already at capacity. So like they brought it live. Again, this is the place where all these blobs or all these L2s, these rollups, they share this block space. And they all have to post all of their transactions there. Again, all shared. And all of these rollups, 40 of them now, even though base makes up like 40% of the 40, they all post this stuff and they're currently at capacity, right? So all the transactions across all those chains equates to roughly 200 TPS. And they're at the point now where any event that happens on any of those rollups, so there's a airdrop on base, airdrop on Arbitrum, Anime dropped there recently, that was last week. That influx of transactions actually increased the gas price on base, right? And it did that because more raw data was needed. There was an influx of transactions. The space that they were all sharing got filled up even faster. Prices go up on base and they start increasing over like 1 or 2 cents per transaction, which is 10x what's going on Solana. So like these rollups are in a position where they're screaming and begging Ethereum to iterate faster, to update, to give us more blob space, this space for them to store their data, because holding them back because they can't compete with highly performant chains that are out there in the ecosystem now, whether it's Aptos or Sui or Solana, soon to be, it'll be us. So I think I think a lot of L2s are running in this position. I think, frankly, everyone in this like middle ground of like trying to play nice, being, Ethereum aligned, whatever. Um, I don't know. I think they're going to go the way of the dodo.
I think, especially as you mentioned, the worst part of the user experience side of things is you don't want to be uh, getting some trickle down effect because somebody else is busy, right?
Noisy neighbor.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really interesting and valid issue that also gets even worse when you have, for example, big market crashes like earlier this week. You've got basically everybody on every L2 seeing higher gas fees. I think one of our teammates had a $15 transaction on base in the peak spike of trying to close some positions
Oh wow.
there. So yeah, that trickle down effect is definitely a huge one. And I guess for better force, maybe one very, very vertical box doesn't have any neighbors to be noisy. So in that
Yeah,
sense,
I mean, the magnitude is different. That's the different, right? Because like EigenDA also has a limit, right? So, but EigenDA is also a tenth the price of Ethereum. Doesn't scale as fast, and it can actually like handle more data. So, even if we run into that issue, one, it happens way down the road, and two, the difference is going from like a tenth of a cent to like a sixth of a cent, right? It's not going from $1 to or under a cent to like $15, right? Like the magnitude is different. That's the rough spot that these Ethereum rollups are in right now, where one, like the space that's available in Ethereum is smaller. It expands slower because it's left to the Ethereum network to update, right? And it's controlled by all of those client teams that have to do it. And it's more expensive. It's like 10 times more expensive than Alt-DA. So these chains, I think, are ultimately going to be faced with the decision to either hamper themselves how they have been for alignment, or they're going to have to make a decision to switch to Alt-DA. And I've already seen teams talking about it, L2 teams. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting alignment moment when that happens.
makes a lot of sense. And then maybe just one other last question on the heavier tech side of things.
Sure.
Obviously, as you mentioned, some of the teams like Arbitrum have their own stacks as well. And that to your point on a lot of them considering these other structures, um, for you guys slash how you see them playing this. So obviously, as we see with Base being an OP stack chain as well, do you see it more likely that some of these other chains are going to have kind of like a guinea pig type of case where they try to still keep one version of what they're running? Like I think Arbitrum already has like Nitro Nova and a few other
Right.
sub brands of what they, or sub flavors almost of the Arbitrum tech that they have. Do you see it more of some of these teams probably to keep some of the alignment are just going to have another sub brand where they try something with the DA? Like what do you see kind of happening there? And I guess as a related question for you guys, Ben, do you see it in the future that other teams might want to run quote unquote a MegaETH stack? And do you guys want to encourage, to your point on app chains earlier, will there be some sort of world someday where people can have their own MegaETH chain? Or are you only wanting to focus on one cohesive ecosystem with the 17 projects that you mentioned so far?
So the sub project question for the current rollups is an interesting one. I honestly hadn't thought about that potential outcome. It would not surprise me because then they're allowed to keep their alignment on one stuff, but then spin up another one and say like, this is our release valve, right? Like, oh, all of our overflow can go over here. It's an experiment. It's like whatever weird, wacky thing. I don't think they'll ultimately do that because I'm still of the belief that like all the value comes from having composable state and like all being in the single ledger. It's the same reason I'm not too hyped up on like just like sharded systems. So I would say like I wouldn't be surprised by it, but I wouldn't expect it. No, I think ultimately they will just make the decision for their main chain. Arbitrum
Right.
and or Base will make the decision and say, look, we have to do this for the better of Ethereum. It's cheaper for our users. We can go faster. We have to onboard the world, everything on chain. And this is a necessary decision for that. And then they're just going to do it.
Yeah, it's a trade-off of the alignment point, as you mentioned, but also just you can't stop business from happening at some point.
Yeah, that's always been my fun of like blob space in general. Like I was at DevCon and I spoke on the main stage about just like blobs in general. I've been a really big critic of blobs. I don't believe there's a DA premium for Ethereum. I think ultimately these teams are just going to look at it as a pure cost, and because they're looking at it as a pure cost, like eventually they'll break away, right? The L2 team gets to say, look, we're making the decision for our users. Our users get cheaper transactions. We're making the decision for us because we're saving money. Like we don't spend as much to operate to do this. We can increase scale. So like now all that stuff can go up. And then like the downside is like alignment breaking, which is like, it's a social thing. It's not that bad, right? They'll just hand wave it away. Oh, look, we have to do it to keep up with Solana. We're doing it for the better of Ethereum, which is like, that's kind of what ours is. We just skipped over the whole step of like feigning alignment. And then, so you asked the question about, like, what would we do for stacks and like app chains, stuff like that, right? I think it's honestly, so it's all about priorities, and it's mostly a question about, like philosophical differences, right? Because honestly, it's no different than Solana and Ethereum's roadmap, right? Ethereum made the conscious decision to offload stuff and therefore made decisions for their own protocol, which impacted and enabled external networks to do stuff, right? They made a decision explicitly March of last year to introduce blob space, which enabled L2s to operate cheaper, right? So they made a core decision to offload stuff. If you look at Solana, Solana is making all of its decisions philosophically to increase its own domain, but it's not able to, because it's a permissionless system, prohibit other people from contributing, right? So you have network extensions coming in, L2s coming in, other people see the value inside of Solana, and because of that, they're naturally affixing value on top of it in whichever construction that they think is appropriate. I am of the belief that that's the better approach. That's kind of, which is funny now because I'm in the Ethereum ecosystem, but I actually align with that Solana approach of like, just do what you can control, continue to optimize your environment, and you will create value because of that. And because you create value, other people will contribute value to that in whichever way that they want. And I think the philosophy will be the same for us. Like we'll have our GitHubs open so people can take whatever code they want and do all that stuff. That'll come, I think, through public testnet. We plan to release it. So undoubtedly, people are going to take the stack and do their own stuff because we're rewriting everything. There will be good stuff in there. But we're not going to work explicitly to enable other things to tack on to us. Like other things can tack on to us if they think it's valuable, but it won't be a philosophical direction for us.
Understood. I think it's a bit of a trade-off of kind of what I call planned cities versus suburbs. Like there's just a necessity sometimes to move out to the outskirts of town just to save on costs and get more space, right? And that's a trade-off that different families might need to make. But at the same time, you've also seen different places that try to build infrastructure around like who or what or where, like the zoning kind of rules of like what should be a suburb. I think there's trade-offs, right? You get some organization and some structure, but at the same time, maybe not the economically most equilibriumly efficient type of outcome. I think the logic that you describe about Solana and kind of similar ethos on your own side, I think it kind of falls into that camp of if you build a big enough city, people will build their own suburbs around it. And that your job is just to make your own city hopefully as good as it can be in the first place. And I think that's a very valid mindset. And then also you already have your quote unquote 17 neighborhoods that you need to support of these current projects that are still growing. Yeah. So before you get to even the next outer ring that you can try to design, like try to fix what you can currently. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think that ties a bit to, as I talk about population and kind of growing the ecosystem, obviously we touched on you getting quite a lot of attention these days with sharing all the insights that you see on Twitter, but also with the NFT launch that in a way, a lot of the things that I think everyone's talking about, I think boil down to if you build the right city, there will be more than 10,000 people that you want to onboard into it. Obviously, the NFT is just a start, and we've always seen many of these NFT collections have 10,000 NFTs. So it's not necessarily saying that you only see these 10,000 as your only citizens, but I'd love to hear a little bit more on just the process of doing this. And I think you've already opined on this quite a bit in social, but I think for those who haven't seen all of your tweets, I think it would be great to share a little bit more on, I guess, first off, the first ethos of trying to get all these users and early believers to be a part of the ecosystem. And then moving forward, what can be done further to expand the number of awesome people that can come into the community.
Hell yeah. So great lead in. I would even say, so you mentioned this as a start. I would say it's a continuation even of our ethos and like things that we've done already. So backing up a little bit, over the last few years, there's been a lot of criticisms of projects coming to market because they launched with a very low float and a very high FDV because they they have devoted a lot of capital and tokens to, or they've raised a lot of capital and devoted a lot of tokens to venture capitalists, right? So, by the time they come to market, they have 100 million, $200 million worth of investments that they have to honor, and yeah. So so they get these tokens over to these venture capitalists, and they have a fiduciary duty to make some money for their LPs, right? So they have to sell up. So the price charts are not always awesome in those environments. I'm not going to call out any names, but like it just hasn't been received well, and it's turned into a meme on crypto Twitter. So the team, before I even joined, right, I actually found out about them after the first big raise. First big raise being $20 million announced in July of this past year from Dragonfly, Joe Lubin, Vitalik Buterin, right, founders of Ethereum. So they all invested $20 million relative to, again, most projects in this space. It's actually very small. But they did that. And instead of, they were approached by a bunch of other venture capitalists to raise tons of more $1 million at crazy valuations, but they deliberately turned all that stuff down because they wanted to try to return to the days of old where community members actually were able to get a stake in the network, right? And all the value wasn't captured in pre-markets and private markets ahead of time. So what they've done is they held off doing raises from a bunch of VCs and have decided to go down a path of multiple ways to get other people, normal people, frankly, involved in the project and have ownership of the network. Our first sign of that was actually an Echo round, where just this past year, Echo is a project that was launched by Kobe's, big in the space, and then just a way to bring investments, like traditional investments, to everyday people or more everyday people. So we raised $10 million from like 3,200 people back in about a month or two ago. Went off really well, broke the record, and Echo reception was great. We loved it. It was the exact same terms as Dragonfly and Vitalik and everyone, the very first raise that they did. Amazing. So same terms. That was well received. This is the second chapter of that. Whenever we did that, we said, like, look, we're not done. We're going to look for more ways to do it. We recognize Echo isn't perfect. You have to operate within the law. Everyone has to be an accredited investor wherever they're at. So this is the second stage of that, where we're trying to find on-chain native ways to allow people to participate. If you look through the announcement, it's very explicit. They worked very hard to make sure that was the case, right? So you have to meet certain rules and regulations in order to say the things that they said. And like in the tweet, it said, these NFTs will represent 5% of the network, right? At minimum 5% of the network. That's a key word, because that actually can change. It can increase over time based on certain metrics that are not released yet. And they're vested, right? They're vested for, I think it's like 50% unlock, go for 6 months, but they have a KPI vesting, which means they can accelerate that unlock based on, again, key metrics that you perform. And yeah, so it's just another adventure to that. 10,000 NFTs, 1 ETH per, it's like roughly $26 to $30 million, depending on the price of ETH in a given day. It's done in 2 tranches because chain, tests not until next month. First 5K are done now. And the people that are eligible have just been core contributors throughout the ecosystem and things that we value, whether you were donated to Tornado Cash, or you participated in some core DeFi products like Pendle, or you played some SocialFi apps like Fantasy Top or FriendTech, like you were involved in some of that stuff. You were contributed to a GitHub that was a great public research GitHub. So like we tried to cover a bunch of stuff to get people in. We're going to have them in next week. Still playing with like the reception. Yeah, this well. The reception was a little too strong, so stronger than we anticipated, and we want to avoid a gas war on mainnet again. So we're working to mitigate that. We'll have some updates out here soon, but yeah, we're really excited. It's just another way to get people skin in the game for the ecosystem, and we plan to have more stuff in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, I love the consistency and staying true to trying to make sure that we build an ecosystem from day one with the users that are going to make it be the place to be, right? I think, as you mentioned with Echo, it was definitely I think, not just the biggest in terms of funds raised, but also the biggest number of users that participated in a given sale, which I think show you a two-dimensional kind of proof that there is this demand for users to be interested. And it ended up becoming quite a bit of a first come, first serve fight on Echo's platform as well to get that allocation. So theoretically, there were even more users that wanted to be a part of it but couldn't. And I think that's something that I think, as you mentioned on the gas race and the issue of this, is something that's near and dear to Impossible's heart, since we've also been doing decentralized fundraising and launchpad types of mechanisms over the last 3 years on chain. And then before that, I was a part of the team at Binance on the Binance Launchpad. So obviously, a lot of these problems of launches, I think, are honestly really difficult. And to be honest, first come, first serve always feels terrible because you don't want to be just the guy that, like you said, clicked and didn't get the interaction that you want, right?
Yeah,
I think that,
and maybe burn some money.
Yeah, especially with a failed gas transaction, definitely doesn't feel good. But I think at a high level, this is something where, as you guys have stated, it's something that I'd love to see, the future iterations of this moving forward as well. It doesn't feel like it's going to be the last or only time that you guys are going to try to keep onboarding more users into the ecosystem. And I think that just as a little bit of context as well, back in the early days before I joined Binance, I was actually an intern at Republic. So I was also in school interested in all of these decentralized launch mechanisms overall. I think it's honestly just a hard problem. And I think for better or for worse, the critics on Twitter, sometimes it's just simply, you guys are one of the earlier teams to be willing to let anybody in the first place.
Yeah.
I think it already means a lot that you guys are trying your best to try to involve as many folks. And I think that moving forward, especially with the barriers to entry, I think the main thing for me is that after seeing how some of our early Binance Launchpad projects like Matic back then, or even BNB Chain for better or for worse, we saw a lot of the retail users in the past that needed cheaper gas transactions and smaller denominations, right? A lot of the average participation that we have on Impossible as a platform is in the ballpark of $50 to $100 sometimes. And so for us, that's something that I already spoke with Shreya in terms of a unit of denomination. Your average on Echo is actually $300 or so because of the 3,000 some folks participating in a $10 million fundraise, right? In this NFT sale, it's 3,000 as the average, not 300. And then in this case, it's 1 ETH, right? For me, one of the things I want to challenge or would want to keep wanting to see the next wave would be figure out where to onboard that gap of users that are probably investing somewhere between $100 to $3,000. Because clearly,
I would love that.
The market has these people, and obviously these people are the ones that actually not having a spike of gas on base to $15 during a crisis moment. For those people, this actually matter. And so I think that's something that I'm excited to see the future iterations on, and also the improvements, as you mentioned, on avoiding the gas races.
Yeah, that's actually that's a fair criticism, not only because of the monetary number, but also just the raw number of an NFT collection. Like that's the unfortunate overhead, because it's not just like a placeholder NFT, right? That's just like, it's a same image 10,000 times, where it could be dynamic, expanded, whatever. Because it's an actual collection, just like the old ones were, like adding another 5,000, adding another 10,000, so you can address more people, even if the total number was lower, like in actual cost. Like to be able to spin up the actual art and collection or expand it to 5 or 15, 20, 30,000 is just not as easy as a lift. So it's not as dynamic. So that was one of my criticisms as well when I heard about the plan. She's like, you hear about these airdrops, these claims, whatever, and the wallets that are distributed to, and you're talking tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands sometimes, because you're right, participation is wide sweeping and usually in smaller denominations. That's why ERC20s are popping off, as opposed to like NFTs, right? It's that dollar figure. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you.
same criticism.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think especially our goal, I think, is all aligned of like we used to work at big companies with millions of users, and now we get the chance to try to build that ourselves. I think 10,000 is obviously an awesome start. Now let's like keep figuring out how to add more zeros to that, right?
Exactly.
So I think it's already something I'm proud to say that we're seeing you guys help set the tone alongside other teams as well that are not just trying to say, oh, okay, well, 10 VCs is enough, right? Well, at least 3 zeros beyond that. But now what's the next things that we can do to keep going more magnitude, more distributed and more inclusive of users?
Yeah, we gotta shift the Overton window, expand it.
Yeah, awesome. I guess a last couple points I want to touch on really quick as well. I saw your point on having the friendly fight on Twitter with Fuel and Nick as
Yeah.
well. I think this is fully on brand to everything that we've said. I think for Better Force, I love that you guys know your role in the space as well as the conversations that you want to be a part of. And I think that Nick actually also did ask the same question of like, how do we move forward as L2's overall kind of problem? So I think want to highlight this one as another case of a pretty wag me vibes because I think for better or for worse, we've seen a lot of factionalism between different chains overall. So I really appreciate that you guys decided to do this, and I'd love to hear you share a little bit more on your thoughts as you see other teams approach scaling as well.
Yeah. So context for the listeners is he's the founder of Fuel. Fuel is a roll up on Ethereum, right? So he started a post and immediately mentioned me. He's like, "Hey, I want to have a debate out in the open for everyone to read it." And it's basically around DA. DA being data availability, being the thing that we've opted to settle away from Ethereum with as to EigenDA because of a capacity limit. And they are self-limiting themselves to be a roll-up, right? They're operating within these constraints because they respect and want to be pure Ethereum, right? I'm doing quotes here. Because this is a debate that's been going on for a while. Like what defines Ethereum, right? Because of the modular roadmap, because Ethereum is not in its mind just the blockchain that is Ethereum. It is this community of blockchains on this roadmap that they have set out to do. Again, it's permissionless. Anyone can do what they want, right? They can't stop us from building our construction. We can do this and whatever. So the conversation was okay. Honestly, it's a little bit like a existential crisis is how I was reading it from him, right? Is like, listen, man, like we are doing what we think is pure, is like true Ethereum thing. We are delivering use cases and we think we can scale at a decent pace. They're getting shellacked by Solana. They can do all this, like more TPS than all the rollups combined, about eightfold what they can do just by itself on daily stuff. And he's saying, look, now MegaETH is coming along. MegaETH is now going to accelerate far, 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 far beyond what we can do on a performance side. But they're sacrificing what we think is a core fundamental thing of being Ethereum, right? To be aligned. And what if users like that? What if users gravitate to that? And what we are doing, these governors that we're putting on ourselves, these limiters we're putting on ourselves to adhere to Ethereum blobs is ultimately holding us back and kills us off because we are making this very like philosophical decision. But like there's comes to properties too, right? It's not a purely philosophical thing. There are technical reasons to do what they're doing, but we made this decision. It's self-limiting us. Like, what happens if it's wrong? Kind of question. And is it okay for us to switch away from this to enable use cases that require higher TPS, require higher throughput, require higher whatever? And yeah, it was just going back and forth. And my ultimate opinion is like, look, I think Ethereum should scale. I think L1 should do its thing. I think the best way to garner value, even if you want to be a money, is to have actual one-to-one connection with users first and foremost, and then two, to prioritize yourself and just let other people add value to you. Ethereum's now in this weird position where it's trying to do two things at once, where it kind of scales itself, kind of has to adhere to blobs. How does it prioritize like doing things that are good for the L2 versus doing things that are good for it? Sometimes some decisions are both. And so my response is like one, I think the experiment should be run on both sides. I think they should do what they're doing. We're going to do what we're going to do. I think doing what we're doing enables a upper bound of use cases that is not possible with what they're doing. And the fact that we are making sacrifices to do that, right? We're adding trust assumptions to our construction. I think it's actually a good thing because even in that his thread, they're saying like, look, man, we're like, some people won't bridge to us. They won't go into MegaETH until, it's stage 2 using Ethereum TA, whatever. And my response to that is like, good. Like, we want you to, if you want to value stuff, like that's the role of Ethereum. Right now, it creates a clear delineation between like, you stay on Ethereum when you have your high value transactions, your slow transactions, your like these use cases that are very important to you, where sovereignty, decentralization, and censorship resistance, all these maximum values need to have transpire. Like, yeah, use Ethereum, man. Ethereum needs users. We need to have people down there. So I think it's good to have a clear line between like the things that you want to do that are valuable to you and need sovereignty, and then like the things that maybe aren't as important that are enabled by us uniquely, whether it's paying for coffee or cap trading on Euphoria or playing AWE box, right? To do any of these things that are maybe not hugely financial transactions. They're just high velocity transactions. You see that on Solana. Solana has, 10 billion TVL versus Ethereum that has 80 billion TVL, right? But the volume on Solana is twice the size of Ethereum right now, which means like the velocity within the ecosystem, it doesn't require a lot of bridge funds, but you can do a lot because it's high velocity, it's high performance, it's low cost, it's all this stuff. So, that's my pushback is like, yeah, like we had trust assumptions. Maybe those trust assumptions scare off people so that people actually think a little bit before they come in. And your dollar goes further, your ETH goes further in our environment because we're a high velocity environment. But there ultimately is no answer to it. I think our stuff is just purely pragmatic. Theirs is a little ideological. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll use an analogy of your beautiful spreadsheet of all of your costs of the countries that you visited this past year. As a bias for a lot of our team being based in Southeast Asia, I think almost all of the countries that our teammates are based in ranked at the best part of your cost per night list there.
It's super chunk from Southeast Asia.
Yeah. I think you can see where it's just being practical. I think a lot of the design space is necessary to push the boundaries on both sides to understand the trade-offs, right? Like nobody's saying that, I don't know, Vietnam or Bangkok threaten the existence of New York, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's a place for this and there's a volume for this, and the velocity that comes from these ecosystems that make those trade-offs, I think, is very clear. Just at the every unit economic level possible, there are businesses that and user experiences that require low cost to exist, right? Like the street food that exists in Southeast Asia, right? It's something
absolutely.
It may not meet all sanitary standards of whatever.
It wouldn't. It wasn't my food reward. Vietnam was number one, dude. I had the amazing pho over there.
Yeah, it's really good. So I think overall, I think that's something that I'm really proud to see you guys make some of these trade-offs too, because I think for us as almost, I'll call us digital citizens using blockchain, across the world, I hope my Brooklyn $30 sourdough is not the standard of my 10,000 yen.
It's an underserved community. Like that's honestly what it's an underserved community within the Ethereum paradigm, right? Like it's so like you have very fast whatever chains. You have Hyperliquid that just did their thing. They're now an L1 that was an Arbitrum bridge thing. You have Solana certain stuff, but like within Ethereum, within specifically the EVM version of Ethereum, there's not a lot of like these high velocity environments. So I think it's an underserved community that clearly was showing there's an appetite for it, right? All of these things are starting to gain momentum that are purely fixated on speed, cost, user experience, like purely. And like, it makes me question, like maybe we over-indexed a little bit on some of these other properties and the pendulum swung a little too far. And that was even my comment to Nick. It's like, now we're starting to see it swing a little bit back towards like this high performance stuff. And it's like, it's going to swing too far at some point and it's going to come back and people are going to realize like, what, we sacrificed a little bit too much. We want to go back to, the base rollups, which are, fundamentally being even sequenced by Ethereum, right? And that's the stronger thing. It's just going to take a little bit longer for that to bake. And this is what humans do. They swing back and forth and we ultimately find a middle ground that works for everyone.
Yeah, that equilibrium is a very interesting one. And I'm really proud to see the type of dialogue that you've been helping spearhead amongst other players trying to find a sweet spot on this equilibrium as well.
Did you see me fight with ZK Sync?
I will say I have no comments there for now, but I think generally speaking, the way that you conduct yourself on Twitter is one that I've mentioned to my own team. I said, like, this guy gets it. He's not here just purely to fight, let's call them superficial ones. There are actually questions of merit, and there's points that I think are worth discussing out in the open so that the users see, what teams are made of and what teams are thinking of, right? And all of these problems that we see. So I guess one thing, tie this back to the field case, I think for me, maybe I'll try to get Nick on as the next episode. I think generally speaking, seeing how he's tried to build everything, even to go to the lengths of building Sway as a language to compile it to the field VM. There's a lot of interesting pieces to how I think other folks have looked at these different structures to build the best environment. It's almost like, for me, a different type of flavor of the Mega Mafia that you guys have done. You're not rewriting a language, but you're at least rewriting how Kane's tried to handhold a lot of the early projects in the ecosystem. I guess Nick's developer way of thinking of this is, if I build a new language, then I can, in fact, everybody to build my way, right? Or build in. Yeah. So I'd love to see some of the ways that you guys are both thinking about this. And I think moving forward, we'd love to see if there's any other big dates that we should make sure that the listeners are aware for you guys. So we've got the 12th as the first phase of this NFT mint. We've got the mainnet testnet coming up soon in less than a month as well. Any other key updates or timings that our community should be aware of?
No, I mean, other than just like we do weekly rollouts of the Mega Mafia team reveals. So like we have a bunch coming out of stealth. So we'll have one every week, sometimes 2 a week, the next 4 to 5 weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And then I'll just emphasize that the testnet stuff, I want to make sure I set expectations on that, where like the chain will be live. Like we're already seeing great numbers, amazing. The thing that I want to emphasize is that like it's not going to be a full-fledged theme park day one. Like it'll be a day to start the open build. So I don't know how much we expect users to be able to do there, but builders should have plenty to chew on, and that's what I'm excited for.
Awesome. So the key intent of the testnet as well is to open up beyond the 17 projects from Mega Mafia that have been able to build in private to be able to now have any builder come.
Correct. And like there will, like the Mafia teams, there are a few that are planning to be live day one that for people to play with. So we've some very curated experiences we want to do. But the primary goal, the large goal, it's not going to be a bunch of stuff, but it'll be some things you can play with. And then we want to make sure that other people can get their hands wet. So our hands dirty. So it's more of an open build. Yeah.
Awesome. Very clear on that. And I think we're all going to be excited to see how the launch goes, both on the community side and on the project side of things. And I think that we're definitely going to see a lot of project teams look to try to experiment. I think the product teams, especially the ones that actually have users, are the ones that feel a lot of the scaling pains that you mentioned already, that the rollups and L2s need to think about. So for me, I think it's going to be a really interesting kind of unravel of how we see the space move forward. So pretty excited overall. I guess any other last takeaways that you want to leave the listeners with?
No, just excited you had me on. I appreciate this. This is great for a first episode. You conducted yourself well. So I look forward to seeing some of these come to my timeline.
Yep. And then I think in the show notes and some of the other things, if you can send us the latest Mafia weekly updates and some of these other things that the community should read up on, we'll compile some stuff and put it down below.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we've run a little over the hour mark. Sorry for not quite fitting inside my blob space of your time today. So, but really appreciate all the great ideas, Breadguy, and look forward to seeing you and the rest of the overall MegaETH ecosystem build over the next few months and launch all this awesome stuff.
Amazing, man. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Around and Find Out. Thank you for tuning in and exploring the latest in crypto and blockchain with us. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share the show with a friend. It really helps us grow. Thanks. We'll be back next Monday to unpack more market insights, talk with more game changers in the space, and keep you plugged into the most important developments in tech. Until then, remember NFA. Nothing on this show is financial advice, so always DYOR, do your own research before making any moves. I'm Calvin, and this has been Tech Around and Find Out. Catch you next time.